Hey, good afternoon, everyone. This is Peyton Robertson. I'm the Director of the National Weather Service Office of Organizational Excellence. Really excited to have folks on board today for a partners webinar for the spring of 2021. For those of you who've been on these calls with us before, you know we trace back to August of last year, the first time we did this fully virtually. We ran a couple of special sessions on the Ridge radar system and on dissemination in December. And here we are again. So, of course, you'll hear the folks that we have to talk to you today. But Andrea, if you want to go to the next slide, I just wanted to hand it over to Andrea here in just a second, but to say that today we're very intentional about getting together with you because it's just been a while. And we think everything from the season to sort of the brighter new year we're looking at and some things that have been happening in weather services are going to be of interest to you. So again, appreciate having you on board today for a partners call. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea on my team, who will tell you a little more about what we're going to do today. So Andrea, all yours.
Great, thanks Peyton, and welcome everyone this afternoon, this morning, maybe for some of you. I'm just going to cover a couple of logistical details for today. So if you go to the next slide and just let you know, everybody is on mute right now, but if you have dialed in on your phone, just make sure you've got your audio pin and you set yourself up there if you do want to verbally ask a question during the Q&A portions of our webinar today. And then we are recording this webinar. We will post it later and share that link with you later in today's webinar for your information and follow up via email. So with that, I'd like to introduce all of our speakers today. We can go to the next slide. Today we have our director, Louis Uccellini for the National Weather Service, our deputy director, Mary Erickson, our newest director of the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, Mike Farah, our director of the Office of Planning and Programming for Service Delivery, Kevin Cooley, and our director of the Office of Dissemination, Michelle Manelli. So without further delay, I'd like to toss it over to Louis to kick us off, and I will see you back in about 20 minutes or so. We're going to have a break for some Q&A. So if you're thinking of a question, please put it in the question box in the GoToWebinar software, and I'll be monitoring those when we open it up for everyone today. So Louis, take it away.
Thank you, Andrea. Welcome everyone, and good afternoon, good morning, and delighted to be here with you. And if we could go to the next slide, please. We got a lot of ground to cover today, so I'm going to try to be quick, but I thought I would give an indication of how we're working within the new administration, and then reflect that in some of the budget news, and then one slide on Weather Ready Nation. So the two priorities you see there, the climate change and the social equity and serving the underserved. You probably have heard this with respect to the overall administration priorities, and it's certainly carrying into NOAA in a big way. The climate change aspect is obviously influencing all components of NOAA, and including the Weather Service, as we work into describing for example, the climate change and its impact on extreme events, and as an example. And so we're still at the table. I think everybody recognizes that previous administration had a very strong emphasis on weather. We're carrying that work forward and working with from a Team NOAA perspective with respect to climate change and climate services that are associated with that. With respect to the service delivery, the second priority, and again brought forward in every discussion, is the social equity issue and serving the underserved. This is a very important part of what we all do as we serve, you know, the rural areas, the poor rural areas in the severe weather environment, for example, and then the folks up in Alaska, the tribal nations. You know, just go through a lot of examples of not only the National Weather Service, but the Weather Enterprise actually doing this. But there are gaps, there are important gaps that we have to address, and we're looking at that, including those with respect to the urban environment, which has some really important issues that we have to address. I would just take a note here that the rate of activity with the new political team is been right from day one has been amazing and to be part of. And it's reflected, for example, in the budget discussions that are going on for fiscal year 22. The new administration came in and were basically rewriting the budget book for fiscal year 22. So I know a lot of you track the budget cycle. We're behind the normal cycle, but for a good reason, especially with respect to NOAA. As you'll see, we're seeing some promising news. Let's just put it that way. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So one of the important aspects here, and this was actually passed and signed at the end of the last administration, is the 21 budget. And with an influence of the new Congress that came in early January, reflected in the increase in the Weather Service budget, as you see, up to $1.2 billion. And this included, for example, a last-minute increase of $1.5 million that was directed right at the dissemination issues that were making the news in December. And you'll hear more about that later on in this webinar from Michelle Manelli and Kevin Cooley, as showing how that is being applied to some of the specific problems that were identified or have been identified, and we're finally getting resources applied to those. So in 21, obviously we're happy with this budget increase, and it really was directed at major gaps in our workforce and our ability to operate with our workforce, including the activities that are needed, the training, the local travel, et cetera, the local connections with respect to providing the impact-based citizen support services across the nation. Next slide, please. So in fiscal year 22, the budget still has not been, the president's budget has not been released, but we have gotten the overview, and that's been made public. And you can see that for NOAA, this is an extraordinary increase to the bottom line of more than $1.4 billion over the 2021 enacted level. So, you know, as we working through the budget, there are a lot of details buried in here we can't talk about today. We have to wait for this to actually be released, but it's really really a remarkable increase to be working with, and a lot of work being done now, not only at individual line offices, but throughout NOAA, the department, OMB, to get this budget ready for release by the President of the United States. Then the increase, can note that as an example of the emphasis on climate, $800 million to expand investments in climate research in NOAA. So NOAA is being advertised as a major department within the within this whole effort of climate research and climate services for this administration. So we're looking forward to this as well. All right, next slide, please. So, so in Weather Ready Nation, you know, it's been 10 years. It's been an amazing transformation, not only within the Weather Service, but I would contend within the enterprise, and with you being part of this overall effort. We should note that we've had this focus on public safety. What we've seen over the last several years is an increasing emphasis on supporting national security in the face of these extreme events. Last year, the principal ones were hurricanes and the fire, of course, the fire season. So this is being carried forward in the new administration. You can see what we need to do. It hasn't changed. We've made tremendous progress in the better forecasts and warnings. I hope you've noticed that, for example, not only with respect to our human forecast, but what's happening with our models and our model performances with the upgraded FV3 based GFS, the consistent products and services, the actionable information connecting to decision makers. The main point I want to make here is that right from the beginning, we've emphasized to all that this involves the entire U.S. weather, water, and climate enterprise working together. I want to thank you for working with us and to help us celebrate these 10 years. You're part of this effort, and we really appreciate it, and we will continue to need your partnership moving forward. So thank you, and Mary?
Thanks very much, Louis. Yeah, absolutely. We can't do it alone. And, even in our Weather Service strategic plan, we've always said that the enterprise partnerships are absolutely essential to us achieving our mission. Next slide, please. So I hope you can see it here, but take a look at this picture that's on the bottom of this slide. This was spring of 2019, and this was a meeting, partners meeting, which I couldn't attend in person. And so I joined remotely and gave a few remarks that way. It was such a novelty at the time that we took a picture of everybody waving to the screen. And I don't think we could have imagined 2 years ago how much telepresence was in our future. So thought you would all enjoy a little bit of looking back there. But even as we celebrate our 10th anniversary, we're looking to deepen and improve partnering. And we really consider partnering an action verb because our work together is absolutely essential for our success. Across the broad range of partners that we have in the weather, water, and climate enterprise, we're looking to work better with emergency managers, government decision makers at the federal, state, local, tribal level, as well as academia, and of course, our industry partners and providers of critical weather services. And more along the lines of the social equity that Louis mentioned, it's local community organizers are a part of that conversation as well. So with these principles in mind, we're really proud to share the NWS partnership strategy with you. It encompasses 3 goals that you can see here and 8 strategies. The strategies really highlight the need for more emphasis on how we ensure our partner interactions improve, continually improving and sharpening the saw, as well as increasing our awareness and understanding the unique roles that all of those, both within the Weather Service and within the partner communities, those unique roles and capabilities, how they help us collectively respond to the increasing demands that we're seeing across the country to a number of extreme weather and water events in particular. So we want to leverage that talent both inside the Weather Service as well as amplifying it with the contributions that all of you make. So this is a framework. It should help us consider how partnerships can strengthen what we're already doing. How can we continue to do that better, from decision support as well as infrastructure improvements that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and including thinking about policy development that we can all advocate for together. We're also trying to gather best practices and maintain situational awareness as the enterprise itself continues to change and evolve. So we will be sending out an email in the next coming weeks to all of you with a link to that document. Next slide, please. We are often asked when we say to folks, what would you like to hear from us about, is that people want to hear about our priorities and our future plans. So here's a quick synopsis of our priorities over the next few years. First, of course, our people are at the heart of what we do. They really have such an incredible mission focus and mission delivery ability that this is key. So internally, we're focusing on development opportunities for our team, culture, diversity and inclusion, and wellness efforts, especially as we hope to be moving towards a post-pandemic world. All of these things are key. But continuing with a focus from our strategic plan, we're looking to continue to drive and transform our services, and looking at the way communities as well as our partners understand, receive, and act on our information. So we're doing this with a true customer focus. We've made that shift over the past decade, and continuing to think about this in the lens of a service delivery framework. And collaboration with our partners, again, continues to be a key here. So one thing we've heard from many partners and as well as customers is consistency and how important that consistency is. So we're going to be looking on ways to improve that and thinking about one weather service, one forecast perspective. We've got a number of internal milestones that are going to help us improve that consistency. As Louis mentioned, we're really focused on building resilience through the tools and services that we provide. So thinking about making sure that that information is reaching communities and that we're reaching all of those communities so that we have equitable services. Applying the social science research and development that we've been working on for the past several years, making sure that we can simplify and hone those messages so they're as easy as possible for folks to understand. And I think many of you are aware of our efforts on hazard simplification. We're also continuing to evolve our efforts with IDSS. We worked with you on our service delivery framework there. And what we're doing internally is developing more detailed instructions and training and tools for our team to make sure that we're carrying out those IDSS duties and thinking about that in that partnership realm that we talked with all of you about so much. So we're really passionate about reaching, as I said, every segment of every community and every region, making sure that their needs are met. As we continue to drive our services, of course, advancing and continually improving the science that underpins those services is absolutely critical. We've had a couple of recent improvements with the GFS version 16 getting implemented, as well as the just this past week, the water model version 2.1, really excited to be able to extend that coverage into the Caribbean, as well as some other enhancements. And of course, we'll be working over the next year to transition to our new supercomputer, which is really, really key to underpin all of these science changes that we have. You know, one thing's at a broader scope, we are thinking about the community modeling framework, and we continue to work within that UFS framework. We'll be excited when there's an EPIC award to be able to really transform the way we work with folks. So we're excited about what's already been achieved with the releases on GitHub, and we'll be continuing to focus that way. Also, just something we continue to hear from stakeholders is how critical these model enhancements and service delivery improvements are, with the focus on subseasonal to seasonal. That's definitely going to continue to be an effort that we're moving forward on. Some of the science underpinnings of that may take over a decade to really enhance, but in the meantime, we're trying to coalesce the community around something we call our Precip Grand Challenge. Hopefully you've heard about that. We're going to continue to advance specific milestones to improve that subseasonal to seasonal ability to predict moisture, precipitation, onset, and recession of drought. So these are really key things that we have. And of course, fortifying and continuing to focus on a robust infrastructure is really important. We're looking at cloud opportunities. We're making progress with the Cloud Smart strategy across government, and thinking about it has to be slow and deliberate movement into these new tools, because we need to make sure that we're creating that uptime and robust services that we need. Michelle's going to talk a lot more in detail about that, but looking at those both web and GIS services that we have. With our own infrastructure, we're looking to integrate our NAWIPS and AWIPS systems. This will allow us to have a seamless situation that's able to meet the needs of all of our forecasters across the country. So that's going to be really key. And again, of course, the work that we've got on NWS Chat is going to be really key in the next year or two. And Michelle's going to go into more details on that. Next slide. Of course, we're all living in the COVID-19 reality. One of the things we are thinking about is being excited about a transition mode, possibly to reintegration. So across the government, this is a slow, steady, flexible, and data-driven. That's our mantra. We're continuing to think about what we've learned over the past year. All of us have, thinking about how do we continue to effectively serve our core partners when we have to use more telepresence, and which in many cases is helping us be creative and finding new ways to fulfill those relationships and make sure that we're providing those services. You know, our aim is continued to be being as flexible as possible while still meeting the needs of the communities that we serve alongside of all of our partners. one of the things that we've continued to do throughout all of the pandemic is make sure that we're meeting our mission. You know, we've never stopped going into our operational workplaces, and all of the work that we've done with partners like you have been really critical to providing that continuity of services for public safety. So we really acknowledge all of the work that you've done with us to make sure that that work continues. Also, one of the things we're really excited about is we've been able to continue hiring, and we really want to acknowledge the great interest there's been across the community of folks moving across different sectors of the weather water enterprise and into the weather service. So we've been able to increase our on board strength over the last year, even throughout the pandemic, and we're really excited about that. Now, in our on-site work environments, any increase we have in the number of people, as I said, is going to be slow and steady. We're going to do that when it's safe to do so. We already scale up when we have extreme events, and we've been minding that protocol, and that's allowed us to maintain pretty reasonable levels, you know, of safety across all of our operations. So one big focus for us, as it's safe to do so, is incorporating more people into those operational locations, and particularly training some of those new employees that have come on board over this period of time. So we look here, you know, we are looking to capture the best of both worlds, what's worked well, the ability to participate in more meetings like this because people don't have to travel. We want to sustain those kinds of opportunities. We look forward to hearing from you about what you've learned during COVID, what things you've found were a best practice that you would like to sustain as we go into the Q&A period. But as we look forward to that conversation, I would like to turn it over and introduce Dr. Mike Farah, our director of the National Centers for Environmental Prediction, and he's going to also the president of AMS. So Mike, take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll start with wearing my AMS president's hat, and it's my honor to serve as the president of the American Meteorological Society. My term ends in January of 2022 at the conclusion of the annual meeting, which we look forward to having a major in-person presence post a wide inoculation period. We're still trying to plan how we're going to do a combination of virtual and in person, but I encourage all of you to please plan ahead to come back together as a community in Houston in 2022 in January. I want to talk to you very briefly about the theme of the meeting. It is environmental security, and that term actually originated within the DoD and intelligence community, and it really became to symbolize the impacts of national security by the environment, particularly climate change, as well as extreme weather events. It's expanded over the years to include those human security things as well that affect individuals and groups. So that can happen overseas as well as in the US. And so the motivation that I got to, and that's one of the things you have to do as president, is pick the theme of the meeting. So the motivation that really I wanted to do is for why I picked this theme is that we are seeing a growing influence of the environment on national and human security. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to help bring in some of these policy experts and those in the societal impacts who are recipients of our services or impacted by the weather and the climate. Those international government organizations or NGOs, humanitarian and relief organizations, as well as other types of organizations across the world. We can bring those folks in and connect them with our scientists and our members of the AMS to try to marry up the impacts of societal impacts of what we do with the science of what we do. Next slide, please. So the way we're organizing it, there's 5 pillars, we're calling it, that we're going to have special focus areas. Most of these, the first 4, have already existing presence within the AMS structure. So the first one is really the broad impacts of extreme weather and climate events. That'll be touched on by many conferences within the annual meeting. And then we have health security and health and environment, which is the impacts of the environment and how it impacts health. We do have an existing committee there within the AMS that can help lead that. We have 2 energy type committees as well as in the AMS that can help lead our energy security, and then several water related entities within the AMS that can help manage the water security. Food security is a very interesting one that we don't have a standing group within the AMS, but there's lots of impacts on individuals, populations, and even nation states on the availability of food and how that's changed with our changing climate. So those are the 5 focus areas that we're going to get special focus. And those will also be co-branded as presidential sessions. So we're going to really try to bring in some really national, international level speakers to kick off each of those sessions. We're also planning some cross-cutting sessions that kind of cut across those 5 themes. One of which that we're really interested in is, we don't have a title for it yet, but it's really a study of the disproportionate impact of these environmental security issues on vulnerable populations. There are some things called environmental justice, which really focus directly on the societal impacts. We are going to do some of that, but our goal here is not just to replicate what you might see in social groups, but actually connect it, societal impacts, to the science of our profession. It's also the first time we're in Houston, so we're going to be engaging with the local public and private sectors in the Houston community to come and work with us across all of these thematic areas. And something interesting we're also pursuing is a special session on environmental diplomacy and how we bring environmental science into diplomatic decisions across the world. Something very, very apropos for the new administration. So if any of these appeal to you as partners and your particular organization, please contact me directly. I would love to have you participate as we plan the annual meeting. Next slide, please. And since it's next week, I got to give a real quick plug for the AMS Washington Forum. Again, unfortunately, this was moved and delayed due to COVID. It was supposed to be in the spring of last year. It got delayed into the fall. So now we're having it at its normal time, and it will be virtual again. This is really the annual platform to examine public policy issues. As a reminder, this is modified Chatham rules. So there's really to encourage openness and sharing of information. This particular forum is organized by the Board of Enterprise and Economic Development, or the BEAD, which is part of the Commission on Weather, Water, and Climate Enterprise. And it's being organized this year by National Weather Service's own Jen Sprague. So I want to thank all of you out there who are sponsors for this. Your contributions are really appreciated, not just for the Washington Forum, but those of you who have sponsored other AMS activities over the years. So thank you. And so next slide, and shifting gears to where my day job, the one I get paid for, is the director of the National Centers for Environmental Prediction. I'm not going to read all 9 of these to you, but you can definitely see that there are 9 centers that you're working over. One of the things we're getting a lot of attention today is INCEP Central Operations, or NCO. Typically, in the past, prior to the reorganization of the Weather Service, it really focused directly on things that affected the national centers and not so much across all of the Weather Service. But after that reorg and the Office of Operational Systems was stood down, a lot of these National Weather Service level impacts and programs, particularly dissemination programs, were transferred to NCO. So in reality, we ought to be calling it National Weather Service Central Operations. You're going to hear a little bit more about that a bit later with our partners over in the Portfolio Office of Dissemination, as well as the parent office of OPPSD. So that's Michelle and Kevin. We'll come up and talk to you a bit more about that. But we are partnered with them in making this work for all of you and for the public. So I just want to hit a few recent changes that things we're proud of, that a lot of us have worked together in terms of recent upgrades. Louis and Mary both mentioned the recent GFS and National Water Model upgrades. Also recently, we've had upgrades to the Nearshore Wave Prediction System, our aviation products based on MOS, the LAMP and gridded LAMP, and a new upgraded version of the extratropical storm surge. As we are getting ready to bring on a new WCOS machine, we will have to take new implementations offline for a while as we transition everything from the old system to the new system. But that's happening later in the summer. So between now and then, we are doing a full court press to bring in lots more upgrades that we can fit in. And some of those include another tweak to the GFS, which will enable us to bring in additional data types, such as the commercial weather radio occultation data, an upgrade to the high-res ensemble forecast system, or HREF, a long-awaited upgrade to the air quality model, and a new improved version of the probabilistic storm surge. And then finally, for the first time ever, an operational, not just research, but an operational coupled model of the whole atmosphere, which is based on the old GFS, and an ionospheric model. So this is really going to be able to be a game changer for how we do space weather operations. So finally, just before we move on, we are also, as new director, I'm going to have an opportunity to update our old strategic plan and really see how working with the 9 INSEP center directors, as well as our partners inside the Weather Service, NOAA, and perhaps even you. So please stay tuned. I may be reaching out to you as we try to build and plan for the type of INSEP we want for the future to meet the goals of a weather rating nation set forward by the Weather Service and our parent strategic plans from NOAA. So with that, I really appreciate your time and allowing me to introduce myself to you. And I'll turn it back over to Andrea for the Q&A.
Great. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, Louis and Mary, for all of your remarks. I'm just going to mention here, if you have a question or would like to verbally ask a question, please either raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can enter a question in the question box. And I'm seeing a couple that have come in, so I'm going to start, and we'll take about the next 15 or 20 minutes or so, and then we'll go into the second portion of today's agenda. So one of the first questions has come in from Mark Andrews, and he's asking, what are the avenues being used to let industry assist in developing IDSS concepts, ConOps, or tools? Is Weather Service going to increase opportunities through ProTech Weather by any chance? And I'll see if, I don't know who might want to take that, maybe Kevin, but
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrew. It's a great question. Yeah, we've got ProTech Weather acquisition underway and have engaged in some industry interaction with ProTech partners, and are very hopeful that that ProTech vehicle, when applied into our environment, will increase opportunities for that kind of interaction. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Kevin. The next question actually is back to you, Mike, related to the AMS. Scott Brown is asking, for the future meeting, is there any intent to include geopolitical security as it relates to great power competition in the Arctic?
Well, that certainly fits in with the environmental security theme. We don't have a special session on that planned, but like we typically do for the AMS, we put out broad calls, and then all the program chairs who run the various conferences see what abstracts are submitted. So that one is a possibility, but again, we're not planning a special session on that just yet, but it could emerge.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in, and I don't see anybody raising their hands. One comment related to COVID, actually, that Bob Goldhammer was curious about. We'll follow up. There was a question on how the Storm Ready program might have actually extended renewals for people this year because of COVID. So we'll do a follow-up and get you some of that information, Bob. We do have another question from Thomas Duke. How tied in is NOAA with NASA in regards to space weather and prediction reporting? I think this is for you, Louis.
I was just going to say, I guess that's me. So I'll speak as the co-chair of the Space Weather Operations Research Mitigation effort that's actually through OSTP. It's at the OSTP level, and it involves 35 either agencies or bureaus. So, and we have had tremendous success pulling together not only the strategic plans, but the action plans, have influenced 2 executive orders and now the ProSwift Act. And the reason I'm pointing that out is that one of the key areas of the ProSwift Act, first of all, NASA has been at the table the whole time, NOAA, NSF, USGS, DHS, I mean, you know, some real big parts of the government from all angles, observations, research, providing official forecasts, and connecting with those who actually do the mitigation steps, all right, if there's a big event coming. So NASA and NSF and NOAA have signed an MOU, which was part, you know, which we were encouraged, I'll just use that word, by an executive order for the R2O02R process. And as we developed that, DOD joined up, and we're in the process of expanding that MOU. And the point is that there's an incredible amount of research and technology development going on, for example, in NSF and NASA in the space weather environment, where there's very little, if none, going on within NOAA. So the dependence on R2O to rapidly advance the forecast capabilities and connect those forecast capabilities to decision making was profound. And it was quickly recognized we weren't going to develop these abilities in-house, as we were being designated the principal agency for providing the civilian component anyway of the forecasts and warnings with respect to space weather. So this has been codified now in law in the Pro-SWIFT Act that we have to do this, and we are doing it. NSF and NASA support the CCMC, this capability at Goddard Space Flight Center to run research models in real time to test them out. We're part of that assessment now. We've actually transitioned the NWIL model from George Mason University. We've transitioned the geospace model from University of Michigan. We've worked with Ceres in terms of that whole atmosphere model that Mike Ferrer noted, and USGS on the electron model that we're doing for the Earth's surface to show exactly what's being impacted. So all of this activity is now codified in law. We're also in a fiscal year 21, we got the test bed being set up in the Space Weather Prediction Center to be a catcher's mitt from these same agencies and other activities that involve now with the private sector. I should also note that the Pro-SWIFT Act has told us to establish an advisory group, a FACA group, that will be managed by NOAA, but that will be applied to all of SWARM participants. This is kind of unique. And we had to go through a number of iterations with General Counsel just to figure out how to do that. But that notice went out yesterday in terms of now starting, we've established it. And now the next step is to select members of that group, and it'll be 5 from the academic community, 5 from the private sector, and 5 from the users. There'll be 15 members on that. So all that's transpiring. It's really exciting. People have noticed that we are actually able to pull together 35 agencies to come up with common plans and common strategies. DOD plays a big role. I haven't really emphasized that. They play a big role also because it's natural events and it's non-natural events. And there's 2 different response aspects to that. So DOD has been at the table right from the beginning, and they have a big role to play in this as well. So I should also note another thing that's coming out of with respect to NASA and DOD is that space weather observations have been principally research missions. So this SWARM at the O part is the operations and observations is now has energized NESDIS, their 3rd pillar. They got 3 pillars now, Geo, LEO, and space weather. So there are follow-on missions that will be more operationally supported than what we've been living off of in terms of these really wonderful research missions, but missions not designed for sustaining an operational presence. So that transition is also occurring, and that's going to involve tremendous partnerships between NOAA and NASA and DOD that has instruments that we're actually adopting for our space weather flight. So a lot of good news here, and we'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Louis. Another question with regards to fire weather from Rick Rosen. He's asking what the status of predictions for fire weather is.
So I think, we're all involved in fire weather has gotten a lot of attention, obviously, not only within various agencies, but now by the Hill. So I think we're going to see some big news with respect to fire weather and mitigation aspects and fire behavior, quite frankly, coming in the 22 budget call. So We, of course, are using the same atmospheric models to predict the atmospheric conditions that are conducive to fire weather, both from the global model and short-range model perspectives. We combine that information with the fuel, the nature of the fuel that would burn. We put out outlooks out to day 8, and then of course as we get towards an event, there are red flag warnings, and then direct support, IMET support, with a very much of an increased presence on these front lines, and we've gotten them greater capability to access, display, brief the firefighters right on the front lines. All of that's been ongoing. What we've seen is a transformation now in, I'll just use California as an example. The IDSS is not just the IDSS that the IMETs are providing on the front lines. As people have gained trust in these forecast capabilities, there are many more government interactions prior to when, we're forecasting the worst possible conditions. Obviously, we don't predict the start of a fire unless it's lightning driven. But the point is that there are many more federal, state, and local agencies involved now in pre-positioning, preparing. They're evacuating places now the day before the expected fires will affect an area, not when the fire's coming over the hill, because these fires are burning hotter and faster. And so they're making decisions further out in time. And we're finding that it's just not the forecast capabilities that these agencies are looking at. They're really demanding or asking, or however you want to categorize it, greater IDSS capabilities. So we're pre-positioning our folks more extensively through these agencies. There's a lot more embedding going on in various state agencies that we weren't doing even 3 years ago, as an example. So there's a lot of activity going on, not only from a forecast perspective, but also from an IDSS perspective, and most importantly, from a response perspective on the part of states and local communities, several days before the fire, the day before, and making sure that the resources are freed up to fight the fires, and not, have everything else mixed in at a time when the fire is coming over the hill. I hope that answers your question, Rick.
Thank you, Louis. I think either Mary or Kevin wanted to say a little bit more about, our interactions with some of the commercial sector.
I can weigh in if you'd like.
Before.
Sure, go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah. The question specifically mentioned Protect, so I talked a little bit about that first. But we've actually just recently completed an acquisition to allow us to conduct some demonstrations around collaboration that's directly related to, obviously, to IDSS, with a web-based, a cloud-based collaboration provider named Slack. And we're really excited about starting that demonstration. We think that the demonstration of that kind of cloud-based collaboration environment, very rich environment. I suspect that at least some folks here already have some experience using a Slack environment. We expect that to provide some greater functionality and greater opportunities for close collaboration, both in the context of what we currently do with NWS chat, as an example, but also as we look forward in our Evolve program. We think that IDSS is also going to benefit from its own management system, its own collaboration environment that would be related. And we think that there's rich opportunities for tools, commercial tools like Slack, to play a pretty strong part in that future environment. And I thought it was worth emphasizing those points. So thank you.
And I guess I should note, Mike, that one of the implementations before we go into the moratorium now was put in place specifically for the GFS to start assimilating operationally the commercially bought radio occultation measurements that NESDIS has been assessing for the last year and a half. And we've been part of that assessment and ready to move forward with that. So we're accommodating commercial activity in our modeling system now in ways that we haven't before.
And to add to that, Louis, I think in the future, once we have the EPIC contract in place, and we get to a state where our modeling codes are easily available and easily able to run, we hope that in the future, commercial satellite providers, for example, maybe have the ability to do testing of the impacts of their own data on our modeling system. So that could be a huge capability. We haven't built that yet, but that's actually one of the future types of activities that we think we could engage the private sector on through EPIC.
There are many examples, increasing number. There's even in a collaboration arena, we're working with Dave Jones and this Connect, this collaborative Connect system, and testing it within the water center. So, I mean, there's just opportunities here that we're embracing, actually.
That's right, Louis. That's the big point here, is that we are really open to using external solutions for these problems going forward. So lots of opportunity.
Okay, thank you all for taking this break and answering some questions from our participants. We're going to change gears now and go to the second portion of our agenda. And I'm going to reintroduce Kevin Cooley, who's the director of our Office of Programming and Planning and Programming for Service Delivery, and our Director of Dissemination, Michelle Manelli. You can both take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Andrea. So next slide. So hello, everybody. So welcome to this virtual format for dissemination. So I'll kind of give you the bluff, the bottom line up front here, and then we'll kind of dig a little bit, and then lots of time for questions. So we are extremely excited that we finally, after a couple of years of working this plan through the process of getting the integrated dissemination program 4-phase plan that was delivered up to the Hill back in October, and it was requested by Senate Appropriations. It was delivered to them, and we made it available to all of you back in December. And it charts the course for our next generation of our technology, of our services, our delivery services for the nation, taking what we've learned and making that go forward. And that is our top priority from the Weather Service, as you've heard from Mary and Louis earlier today. So over the last 6 months, to talk about it right up front here, yes, we've had a series of unrelated building, network, and application related issues that unacceptably impacted our ability to disseminate all of our data, products, and services at various times. And those aren't okay. We recognize that we are on a path getting us, towards a better reliability and sustainability. We did get a $1.5 million increase of our budget in FY21, and we've already, executed some procurements. And where we've centered those additional funds this year is looking at, number one, that bandwidth capacity limitations that we have. So for many of you, of how you access our data and products that are available on our IDP private cloud infrastructure in College Park and Boulder, what we're doing, that bandwidth constraint of how that information gets out and how you're able to access it, the bandwidth is not as large as it should be for what we've grown to be. And I'm kind of going to get into a little bit of how we kind of gotten here. But where that 1.5 million is going towards, it's increasing our network routers, network cards. We're going to be buying load balancers to be able to balance that load more appropriately and get us to more of a 100 gig bandwidth pipe. And that's going to continue to achieve that into FY22. So we're buying the equipment now, and then we'll be implementing it as we move along. So for the IDP plan, kind of like a big picture on this, phase 1's completed. Phase 2, we're going to complete by the end of calendar year 22. And then we have a lot of new public cloud initiatives that are being demonstrated and applied now, some of which we already spoke about briefly with NWS chat. So, looking at that IDP plan from a big picture, if you go to the next slide. So looking at that, that phase 1 that you see in green, it started back in 2013 where we focused on creating that data centers, getting the increase of bandwidth to each of the forecast offices, and then transitioning some of our, those watches and warnings, how we deliver those watches and warnings with our core switching system and various products onto the system. That was completed back in FY17. Phase 2 was enhancing some of that reliability, optimizing ongoing sustainability of the system. But what that gets us through phase 2, it's only about 60% of those primary mission essential functions that are going to be migrated into IDP. Applications that really do require that high availability, low latency type of products. And they're often needing to like re-engineer some of those applications when they do get to IDP, which often takes a bit longer. And then you see us doing this through the end of this calendar year, and then you see phase 3 and phase 4. So in a nutshell, phase 3 is creating a sustainable on-prem system. So the issues that we've all experienced over the last 6 months, those don't happen. Phase 3 is to get us to a better place of reliability, of being able to fully run all of our application services from one system to the other, fully being able to transition rather quickly from one system to the other. And then you see phase 4 with the public cloud. So working in tandem with that, knowing that everything being on-prem, it isn't the right way to go. Looking at it more of a cloud smart approach for the right fit of the right applications, knowing how to take advantage of our awarded, the NOAA cloud utility contracts and the big data program, how we can then evaluate applications and move those to the public cloud and giving them the right level of support as well that goes with it. Next slide, please. So the dissemination scope, if you look at this, we support from a dissemination perspective, the forecast offices, the regional operations centers, the CWSUs, the river forecast centers. It's all of the weather service and it's all of you. So both internal and external. The scope of dissemination, it's large and it's critical that it all works together and it works all the time. So we've set our bar high, and we know that where we want to be is a goal to deliver at 99% reliability. We recognize we're not there, but where we have a path and we have a plan that's going to get us there. And we're using our infrastructure systems both on the on-prem and looking on the public cloud to demonstrate that art of the possible. We have, collectively close to 60 applications that are either already on our system or need to have find those permanent systems in places where they need to go. Next slide, please. So this kind of gives you, if you look kind of the colors of how they kind of matched with the various phases. So what you see in green, those are the applications as of this month that are running operationally 24/7 on IDP. I want to also point out where you see at the top of our dissemination sites in Boulder and College Park are legacy web farms, which have been a challenge. So things such as NWS chat, our Spot, our WeatherWire service, our weather.gov. There was a lot of core of our web systems that were on our legacy web farms in Kansas City and Silver Spring. You see now that one of our web farms is now in College Park. Well, following the issue with our Silver Spring Weather Service headquarters in Silver Spring at our building, we actually got that infrastructure of those servers and we moved them to College Park to get them into a better location, a better facility that was built to be a data center. NCO right now is doing final tests on a lot of those systems. They're running through getting all those systems up and running to get us back into those primary and secondary instances of those web farms. So once again, for circling back into the plan, looking at what's getting completed in phase two. We're doing some for NWS chat. We're taking the existing NWS chat that's running in Kansas City right now, and we're going to get that application onto IDP. And that's kind of our medium-term approach. We're also looking at AHAPS and the Office of Water Prediction on getting their applications and services for water resources and getting those tools and applications on IDP. For phase three, looking at IDP, once again, requirement scoping for weather.gov, doing an analysis of those remaining applications and services on the legacy web farm, looking for where future home, and most importantly, looking at that increasing that network bandwidth capacity. So continuing what we started this year with that increase of 1.5, and we're making it stretch, or we're making very good use of it, of trying to increase that bandwidth as we go into 22. And then for our NOAA public cloud is the initial launch of our enterprise national viewer, and I'm going to talk about that. We're going to be doing some model data public cloud demonstrations the latter half of this year, and then the COTS demonstration for NWS chat. So next slide, please. So I spoke about at the beginning about, some issues in the last, 6 months that we've all kind of felt at various points. So yeah, it's been the battle of the bandwidth. And when we built IDP, we built it for that phase one that I talked about at the beginning of what we kind of scoped out. And there was a bit of kind of phase two in there of some critical applications we put on there. And what we've seen is, the success of the system, of having all that data, of our model data, of our observational data, radar data, everything located in one location, that both we can serve internally and external to all of you. It got really popular, and which is a good thing. That you wanted to come and get all that data, but also what it ended up doing to our systems, where there was the explosion. It's like, okay, well, didn't you know that was coming? It's like, well, we did, but how the behavior of that goes, it's a little bit different to how to predict that on if you compare how a supercomputer works, it's very predictive. It's very batch job, so you know exactly how things are going to run. When you have an external driven system where you have people coming in, and it's going to be driven based upon demand. It's going to be driven based upon, is there a Cat 5 hurricane that's making landfall and everybody's going to get the same data at the same time. The systems are going to behave a little bit differently. So looking at that and looking at, this is, part of the reason of how we've kind of gotten into this. But with this, we've learned a lot. We're getting, we have our plan moving forward and trying to kind of adjust to this. In the interim, what we've seen is to minimize some of those sporadic overloads. We at first proposed last fall, as you're very aware, of limiting access to 60 hits per second. We've changed that. So this week, based on that customer interaction and that feedback, we've worked with many of you, and we put in a rate limit access of 120 hits per second, and it's only on for nomads and FTP PRD, so it's not impacting all the applications. And so we've been monitoring that. We've worked with several of you over the last couple of weeks, making sure and doing tests to see if how that's going. So that was put in this week, and kudos to, I appreciate the folks at NCO kind of was able to figure out a solution of only looking at this from nomads and FTP PRD, so it didn't impact everything. And I do appreciate, I've seen the emails and the traffic of many of you, of our partners, of coming back and working with us on how to get to this kind of solution to kind of help us kind of move forward so that we can continue to get these model upgrades and get the data out to you. Next slide. So planning for success, cloud opportunities. I mean, I'm really excited about where we're going in a lot of our clouds. So we have that NOAA Cloud Utility Contract Vehicle. We have we've already launched the Damage Assessment Toolkit, and that's fully running on the NOAA Public Cloud and the AWS, I should say, of where that award went to on that cloud service provider. And it's not in here, and I just had a meeting with my team this morning on how things are going with our various cloud projects. The Damage Assessment Toolkit was a very small kind of application. At the end of March, after one of the storms, it received 3.5 million hits on this application on the cloud. And I mean, you see all the stats and we're watching it, and it's working. We're looking at the GIS viewer now, so we're in initial operating capability right now. So we're doing an internal review of the viewer. So this viewer, managing those expectations, it's for those high-powered users and customers who really want to dive into the data, create layers of data focused on either just water or tropical or various things, and to kind of interrogate that data. Also, what we're doing, very excited about this, and Kevin mentioned it yesterday. We've been working, trying to get an award of a vendor to demonstrate and leverage commercial tools that are out there. We went down paths long ago in the Weather Service for a couple decades thinking we had to build this stuff ourselves. We don't. We know that. We know we don't want to. We shouldn't do that. Build all our own applications. So what we're doing is we've teamed up looking at a demonstration of that new COTS solution, looking at Slack. We're going to do a first phase where we kind of scope out what the requirements are, see how much this commercial tool can help leverage and bring in some of the requirements of NWS chat and kind of integrate those into the application. And then we're going to do some demonstrations when we get into the fall with some key forecast offices, as well as some partners, and demonstrate to see and validate if it works. And if it works in looking at resources going forward on looking something for more of a long-term approach. Recognizing that the NWS chat that we have, we're getting it onto better infrastructure, but we're aware that it was never designed to handle 2,000 users at any one time during high peak events. So that's kind of where we are on the cloud opportunity side. Next slide. I think we're up for questions. We are. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, great. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, we're going to open it up again for some Q&A. If anyone has a question or would like to verbally ask a question, you can either raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or you can chat your question in the question box. I will say I'm looking through some comments here. There's a lot of excitement for cloud, Michelle and Kevin, and a couple of comments. How can we help? When can we get involved? Who can we talk to? So I know you've mentioned some awards and things that are already underway, but there's a lot of excitement for wanting to be a part of the process, and any way we can include our partners in doing that will be really good thing for us. Did you want to say anything more about that, or?
Yes, so I mean, I can. So I'm excited too. I mean, I think you could. I think because and it's not to say what we're doing on-prem isn't good. We need an on-prem piece. We recognize we can't put everything on our on-prem systems, because our on-prem systems, they need to be reserved for those, watches, mornings, critical, timely information that you need within seconds. And then you look at these cloud opportunities, and yes, with the viewer and having some more of those, decision support tools or collaboration tools, that when we can look at various layers and discuss with our partners and having that, it provides a lot of, I think, opportunities. And looking at, leveraging some tools that are already out there. We shouldn't be building things from the ground up. Let's take what's out there. And engaging with the partners, I always appreciate that. If we were all face to face, we'd be having lots of, discussions probably after this meeting as well.
I think that it's another kind of turn on that too, is I think that it's important to kind of recognize and acknowledge that we as a group, that you as a group of partners, helped us in our thinking. Mm-hmm. Right? So just in terms of the IDP plan that we've put out a bit ago, even the notion of a hybrid cloud environment as a technical strategy, combining both some on-prem, some public cloud. I mean, our dialogue with you was very helpful in helping us go through what having that as a strategy and the right balance point. And so thank you very much for the time and energy that you took working with us to do that. A second sort of idea is that as we go through, even just looking at our upcoming pilot and demonstration with something like Slack, right? Whether it's as a partner in the context of emergency management partners and participating in that kind of collaborative environment with us directly, or in even a larger sense when we deal with the pilot that we've kind of got ongoing with model guidance data in the public cloud. We're going to rely pretty heavily and value very heavily the comments and feedback that we get from you about how well that's working, how to configure that collaborative environment so that we get the best reach, we get the best collaboration, maybe subtle changes and configurations that we're going to want to make in that public cloud environment or even in our on-prem environment to get the best balance of resources and performance that we can get out of the environments that we have. So we value very greatly and will rely upon your involvement with us to help further tune those technical environments so that we get that best balance going forward. Thanks.
All right, I'm seeing actually a hand raise, and I want to see if Jean View, I'm going to unmute you and see if you'd like to ask your question.
Actually, that was actually a mistake. I don't have any question, but hi, everybody. Good to see you.
Well, we're glad to hear you.
Hi, Jean.
Hi, Jane.
Okay, I don't see any other hands raised. There is a question, though, regarding actually radar coverage, so a slightly different topic. But the question is whether or not there's been any discussion or thought about adding any additional radar sites or offices to try and fill in areas where there might be gaps.
Okay. I can probably take a little bit of that. Okay, so we are always scrutinizing the tension point between cost of coverage and value of coverage for something like radar, and that includes even how we tune individual radars, their elevation settings, things like that. So we've made adjustments to elevation settings to help us with some coverage in particular areas in the United States, and we continue to engage in that process. We did a fairly exhaustive study around national coverage for radar to try to get a sense for whether or not there were places in the country where we would significantly benefit by having radar coverage in terms of the avoidance of death or significant injury from unwarned severe weather events in this case. And the general conclusion that we reached was that our current extent of coverage is we're at the right place. We're at the sweet spot for that in terms of the number of radar locations, S-band radar locations we have, and their coverage. We also recognize that we leverage mesonet data from other radars that are outside of our network. We leverage data from FAA radars, terminal Doppler radars, and others to give us. So we've got a lot of overlap in our radar network. So we think we're in the right place. We have to balance the desire for additional coverage with the reality of the cost of that coverage and the implications of that bearing the cost of that coverage may have in our overall observational program. Lastly, I would offer that there is an environmental component to this, which is not necessarily location specific, but it's something that we pay a lot of attention to, and that is where we've got a radar that's in an optimal location in terms of geography, but where we've had things like forestry changes over the last 2 to 3 decades, trees getting bigger that provide some issues for us around interference, as well as the trade-offs that we make in terms of the presence of wind farms in some locations that have also presented some interference issues. So as we continue to work through those, we may have, there may be a value proposition of changing the location of a particular radar or changing its technical attribute based on those kinds of factors that weren't necessarily prevalent in the when the original set of radar locations was laid down. Thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. I think maybe
Kevin,
Michelle?
can I, since
Go
this
ahead.
is a discussion, Kevin, is another aspect of this that you may want to just touch upon is the multi-radar, multi-sensor advancements that we continue to work on with NSSL and the fact that we can bring these different radars. We have the potential to do that. It's actually part of the dissemination discussion that we've
Yes.
had, and where does that actually belong? So we are paying attention to the processing of the various radars and bringing it forward within this type of a system. So I thought I would just mention that.
Yeah, absolutely, Louis. The kind of what you might call post-processing and visualization and the integration of information across multiple radars and multiple sensors is a big part of the value proposition that we see there. Good, great point. Thank you for bringing that in.
Michelle, I think I'll turn it back over to you. I think you wanted to follow up on some of the.
Yes, thank you. So on some of the cloud, so this is a kind of a heads up that I wanted to speak about as well with the cloud opportunities piece regarding, recognizing with, the drive of getting, timely model data reliably as much as possible via HTTPS through the FTP, PRD, and NOMADS mechanisms on IDP. Heads up, we're going to be issuing a PNS pretty soon of an opportunity of demonstrating. We're picking 3 models: the GFS, the HER, and the RAP. Those are the highest, the top 3 models that most of you want to that access. And we're putting those in the big data project area on the cloud, and it's going to be available on all 3 cloud service providers. Recognizing, we've spoken to some and trying to see is the feasibility on this. What we need, so we'd like to get out of this knowing that it's not going to be 24/7. So I'm not expecting everyone, just to, stop going to NOMADS if you need it for operational purposes. But if you're looking at it from a research perspective, try it, look at it for our partners of the Weather Enterprise and need for operations. We're really going to be looking to get some feedback on, the access of that data, the formats and how you're able to manipulate it. Is it any easier for you? Because then we can learn from that. And then based upon your feedback of looking at, okay, what's that next phase going to be like? And recognizing if we're going to do this, there would need to be a 24/7 support factor on that. But we need that initial feedback. So that's where this kind of partnership comes into play, and how we've kind of gotten a great deal, of where we are, of kind of adjusting of how we're providing this information to all of you, is having these discussions. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there of what's heads up on where that's coming.
Yeah, Michelle, I'd like to add just one point to that. That's a great effort. And from the INSAT perspective, those of us, of course, that deal with the models at the Environmental Modeling Center, and all our partners that we partner with across NOAA research that provide some of the research grade models that we bring into operations. Having the ability to have that model output available on a cloud platform really is going to be a huge advantage in us collaborating with you in the private sector in terms of post-processing, of how you can take that model output and create value-added products, as well as testing and evaluation and intercomparison. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here that would really, I think, up our game in collaborating and really open up opportunities for you as well to exploit our data in ways that, with all the data being available on a cloud platform, many of which you use as your operational system, I think it really opens up a lot of possibilities for collaboration. So I'm really, really excited about what Michelle just talked about.
Thanks, Mike, for adding that.
All right, I'm gonna go back to the audio here. I see that Tom Fahey, you've had your hand raised. I'm gonna unmute you and you can ask your question. Tom, you might have to unmute yourself on your end. There you go.
Okay, how's that work?
Works great.
All right, cool. Hi, Michelle and company. Don't want to ignore anyone else. During this transition, will dissemination partners be added to the LDM configuration so that they can access the RPCCDS level 3 radar data?
So Kevin, do you want to take that or do you want me to? I can answer that if you'd like.
Why don't you take the first stab, and I may weigh in with some other things. Okay.
Okay. So that the LDIP, so we have multiple ways. Our primary way to get our radar level 3 data is through our telecommunications gateway FTP system, TGFTP. And the LDM piece was set up a lot for internal government and within of getting that data internally quickly to our offices within the Weather Service. So as far as making that, like the supportability of that and looking to see the difference, as far as the availability of timeliness between LDM and TGFTP is the primary supported way to get that radar level 3 data. And I think the difference is less than 15 seconds or 10 seconds. I mean, it's available at the same time. And then Kevin, I don't know if you want to follow on from there.
Sure. We recognize that there is some precedent for having used the LDM to disseminate or provide data to entities outside of the Weather Service. We have a small number of those entities today. Michelle hinted at this. I'll discuss it a bit more. We tend to try to avoid situations where we use a capability that is necessary for the internal functioning of the forecast, watch, and warning process for the Weather Service, that we load that internal capability with highly variable external demand. It's a process that we call it separation, but we want to make sure that we've got the systems in place that enable our core mission functions, preservable, securable, and exposed to consistent demand. And so in this case, since we've got a viable external pathway that's been designed for external access to data, it performs well. We will enable some access to LDM, but are planning on retiring that access out over the next year or so that we maintain this separation and we have external access to the data that you're describing, Tom, through externally targeted means, and then we preserve our internal mission system in a separated way to assure our critical mission functions inside of the Weather Service. Thanks.
Okay, we have another hand raised. Dave Jones, I'm going to unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, thanks so much, Andrea. And I just want to say hi to everybody. It's good to see your faces, even though we haven't been able to get together.
Hi, Dave.
Mike, welcome to NCEP. That's pretty awesome. I, I just wanted to say that, you know, thanks for all of you getting together, because I don't know of any other single federal agency that does this with their leadership. So that's really, really appreciated. And I also just wanted to thank, you know, Louis and everybody for investing in dissemination, because we can have the best models, we can have the best observations, we can have the best warnings, timely warnings, but if we can't get them out, it's worthless. And it's so important to get that bandwidth open and get those IDP and GIS services available, so everybody can take advantage of those great products. So it's not a question, but just a thanks for getting together, and thanks for improving those services, because we're working with a lot of people that certainly need them.
Thank you so much, Dave.
So if I may, so thank you, Dave, for those comments and the focus on dissemination. It gives me the opportunity to remind everyone that before we did this restructuring, both from a budget perspective and from a program management perspective from within headquarters, we didn't have a dissemination portfolio. There was no national there was no national embrace of the dissemination process. So we had 6 different regions doing 6 different things to do what they had to do. I recognized immediately we had to bring this, basically build a system just like we built the central computing system with the primary and backup and everything else that goes with it, which took 5, 6, 7 years, by the way, for those who were around the turn of the century, as Kevin and I were around, you know, firsthand dealing with this. It's absolutely necessary. It's not easy, but that hasn't deterred us from developing the plans and making this work to the best we could within the resources available, and takes incremental steps. Now I think we're in a position to work more parallel, and we have, after dealing with some other issues within the Weather Services, top priority. So we've got to make this work not only the way we want it to work, but the way you want it to work. So we're, you know, all hands on deck with respect to this. So, but thank you for your comments and recognition the importance of what we're all doing here. Thanks.
Thanks, Louis. I've got one last comment / question, and then we'll wrap for today's webinar. Michelle, I think this is to you, but this is in general. The question is about where can feedback be provided, or what kind of benchmarks, you know, you might be looking for. So I'm thinking in future communications that we put out, you know, maybe there's a way for us to be a little bit more specific about where we might want people to provide feedback on specific aspects of our dissemination program. So just wanted to point that out. And I don't know, Marie Colton, if you wanted to clarify your comment, I can certainly unmute you if you'd like. I think she declined. Okay, that's fine. All right, we're gonna wrap for today and go to the final slide in our presentation. And just note for you first, thank you for joining this afternoon. I know it's a Friday and it's been a busy week for many of us. But I want to also look ahead and make sure you're aware of some upcoming opportunities to interact with the National Weather Service. Next week, in parallel as well with the AMS Washington Forum, there's also a Weather Ready Nation Ambassadors Roundtable on April 27th. And if you go to the link on this slide, you can go there and register for that specific event. Also, later in May, we'll be hosting a Weather Service Academia Partners Roundtable. This is really meant to be a good two-way dialogue with our academic institutions across our atmospheric and environmental science community. There's information as well on the same website with an agenda, and more information will be coming in the next week or so. And then you probably saw some information come out last week. There are some upcoming hazard simplification webinars that are going to be hosted in May as well. We really want your input, your feedback, as that program really continues to move through the plans in simplifying our hazard services. And then last but not least, we always offer this up. If you'd like one way conversations, two-way conversations with our deputy director, please reach out to me and we can certainly schedule those in the future as well. So thank you again. Thank you for joining. I do have questions that you might have submitted, and we'll go through those and follow up with you if necessary, but you can always reach out to me directly as well. And thank you to all of our panelists, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you again very soon. Have a great Friday, everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Have a great Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.